killing me inside. I miss my baby.
Without a doubt, we know that my daughter was not a drug user, and I had a second autopsy myself, paid out of pocket, because we felt so uncomfortable with the way it was handled.
Like, I'm scared. Like, when am I gonna have kids? I don't have a car yet. Like,
If I told you that a vibrant 23-year-old woman could vanish from the world overnight, leaving behind only questions and contradictions, would you believe me? This is the story of Lauren Smith Fields, a young woman with everything to live for, whose final hours remain shrouded in mystery. Lauren wasn't just any 23-year-old. She was a former high school track star, studying to become a physical therapist. She was active on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Her social media painted a picture of someone full of life, confidence, and promise.
Okay, so guys, this is my first time trying seaweed. It's sea salt flavor. Let's see if I like it. I'm at a red light. Let's hope.
like, not even to have a little sob story. Like, I'm really about to be 25 in 2 years. Like, you know what I imagined for myself at 25 when I was like 12? In a big ass house.
Her post showed her glowing, healthy, and glamorous. But behind the curated perfection of her online presence was a night that no one saw coming. A night that would spark questions, outrage, and a desperate search for answers. Imagine a young woman could go on a date, end up unresponsive by morning, and the last person to see her alive wouldn't even be considered a suspect. That's exactly what happened on the night of December 11th, 2021, when Lauren Smith Fields went on a Bumble date with Matthew LaFountain. Bumble, a dating app where women make the first move, had brought them together just days before, but by the next morning, Lauren was gone. According to Matthew, the night started innocently enough. They drank tequila, they talked, they laughed. But then the night took an unsettling turn. He told investigators Lauren stepped outside briefly to return clothes to her brother. When she came back, she spent an unusual amount of time in the bathroom, around 10 minutes. He said she looked unwell, vomited at one point, but then they continued drinking. Therefore, when Matthew woke up at 6 a.m. to find Lauren unresponsive, with blood coming from her nose, panic set in. He called 911, performed chest compressions under the guidance of the operator, but it was already too late. Paramedics determined she had been dead for at least an hour before she was found. But here's where the story takes a perplexing turn. Despite being the last person to see her alive, despite being in her apartment when she passed away, Matthew LaFountain was never considered a suspect. In fact, police immediately ruled out foul play, citing no visible signs of violence. Lauren's death was officially ruled an accidental overdose caused by fentanyl and alcohol mixing, a conclusion that left her family and many others reeling with questions. How could police be so quick to dismiss foul play? Why wasn't Matthew questioned more thoroughly? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, why does this happen so often, and to so many women who don't get answers? If I told you it took 6 weeks and public outrage for authorities to finally launch a criminal investigation into a young woman's mysterious death, would you believe me? That's exactly what happened in the case of Lauren Smith Fields, a case that has become a symbol of systemic failure, unanswered questions, and a family's relentless pursuit of justice. The state's chief medical examiner, Dr. James R. Gill, ruled Lauren's cause of death as acute intoxication from a combination of fentanyl, promethazine, hydroxyzine, and alcohol. Her death was labeled an accident, a conclusion that seemed definitive on paper, but raised far more questions than it answered. But Lauren's family wasn't convinced. Her attorney, Darnell Crosland, pointed out an unsettling detail. I've never seen a medical examiner conclude a mix of drugs as an accident without knowing who provided the drugs or how they were ingested. Therefore, the family demanded transparency. They demanded answers, and they weren't alone. Public outrage grew louder. Social media became flooded with calls for accountability, and the case began to gain national attention. But here's where the story takes an infuriating turn. It wasn't until the medical examiner's report went public and public pressure reached a boiling point that the Bridgeport Police Department finally launched a criminal investigation. 6 weeks after Lauren was found lifeless in her apartment, the Narcotics and Vice Division, along with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, were brought in to probe the circumstances surrounding her death. Police Chief Rebecca Garcia announced, "The Bridgeport Police Department continues to treat the untimely death of Lauren Smith Fields as an active investigation. We are now refocusing our attention and efforts on the factors that led to her untimely death." But here's the complication. While an investigation was finally underway, trust had already been broken. The family had been kept in the dark, brushed aside, and made to feel as though Lauren's death was just another statistic. Now they were left to wonder, if the investigation had started earlier, could key evidence have been preserved? Could critical questions have been answered before they turned into speculation? 3 glaring questions remain. Who provided the substances that led to Lauren's death? Why did it take 6 weeks for authorities to act? And why were the family's concerns dismissed so quickly in the first place? Therefore, the family took matters into their own hands. They rallied support, hired legal counsel, and continued to raise their voices on every platform available. They knew this wasn't just about Lauren. It was about ensuring no other family had to endure the same silence, the same dismissal, the same unanswered question. Lakeem recounted what he saw. A large bloodstain on Lauren's bed, streaks leading to the side, flipped plates, used cups, and a used lubricant nearby. But instead of being collected and examined, these items were overlooked by the very people tasked with finding the truth. But here's where things get even more troubling. The family silenced by authorities and frustrated. Lauren's mother, Chantel Fields, shared that she learned about her daughter's death not from the police, but from her daughter's landlord. When the family pressed investigators for updates, they were allegedly told to stop contacting the police. And when they questioned Lauren's date from that night, they were assured he was a really nice guy. Therefore, the Smithfields family began to wonder.
Work with us in some way. We haven't heard from them at all. It's almost like they're trying to sweep everything under the rug.
Here in our Black community, we pay taxes, and they should be working for us and our family and show that they care for us and they're not going to just throw us out like we're rubbish. Every Black person, every person of color matters.
Was their daughter's life seen as less valuable? Was this case dismissed because of systemic bias? The family publicly voiced their belief that institutionalized racism played a role in how the case was handled, and they weren't alone. Supporters across the country echoed the same concern. But here's where the story escalates. Under mounting public pressure, 2 detectives, Kevin Cronin and Angel Llanos, were placed on administrative leave for mishandling Lauren's case. An internal investigation found they failed to follow standard protocols, didn't write timely reports, and neglected to contact the medical examiner for critical information. Yet, despite these findings, both detectives were reinstated after appealing their suspensions.
I want to once again express my condolences to the families of Lauren Smithfields and of Brenda Lee Rawls. And I want you to know that I am extremely disappointed with the leadership of the Bridgeport Police Department and have found the actions taken up to this point with regards to these 2 investigations unacceptable. After viewing these matters even more closely, and in the absence of the police chief, I've directed the deputy chief, Chief Baraha, to immediately put on administrative leave the 2 officers who are the subject of the Bridgeport Police Internal Affairs investigation for lack of sensitivity to the public, for failure to follow police policy in the handling of these 2 matters. So to be clear, effective immediately, both Detective Llanos and Detective Cronin are suspended from duties and put on administrative leave until such time as the Office of OIA has finished their investigation and disciplinary cases have been completed. In addition, the supervising officer who was in charge of overseeing these matters, has retired from the department this past Friday. Let me also say this. The Bridgeport Police Department has high standards for officer sensitivity, especially in matters involving the death of a family member. And it is an unacceptable failure if policies were not followed to the extent of this, and to this family and to friends and all who care about human decency that should be shown in these situations, in this case by members of the Bridgeport Police Department. I'm very sorry. And I want to be clear to members of the public and the department that insensitivity, disrespect in action, or deviation from policy will not be tolerated by me or anyone in this administration. My disappointment and demand for accountability in these and other matters brought to my attention will remain until all the questions that have been asked are answered to the satisfaction of all. It should also be known that the untimely death of Lawrence Smithfield and Brenda Lee Rawls are both still under active investigation and have been reassigned to other members of the Bridgeport Police Department for resolution. I want to thank Attorney Crossland and the family and the thousands of others for reaching out and asking the questions that needed to be asked and that still need answers. I, as mayor, but also as a father, cannot really fully comprehend what must be going through. But I can only pledge my continued support to try and ease your pain by gaining answers and holding those responsible accountable. Thank you.
3 key questions remain unanswered. Why wasn't the evidence at the scene properly collected and analyzed? Why did it take nearly 2 days for Lauren's family to be informed of her death? Why was her date immediately dismissed as a suspect without thorough investigation? Therefore, Lauren's family had no choice but to take action. They filed a lawsuit against the Bridgeport Police Department, accusing them of racial insensitivity, a failure to investigate, and a blatant disregard for their daughter's life. Lauren's family insists she wasn't someone who used drugs. The unsettling reality is that Lauren's case isn't an isolated incident. Incidents involving harmful substances on dating app meetups have been steadily increasing. Victims often wake up disoriented, unable to recall what happened, or in Lauren's case, don't wake up at all. And yet, the legal framework protecting these platforms remains largely unregulated, shielded by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Bumble issued a statement emphasizing their commitment to user safety, but stories continue to emerge of victims falling through the cracks, of predators exploiting the platform's weaknesses, and of corporate accountability being avoided under legal protections. How do we fix a system that seems designed to protect platforms over people? How do we hold authorities accountable when trust has already been broken? And most importantly, who will stand for Lauren when the institutions meant to protect her didn't? In over 2 years, police and city officials have provided little more than silence. Records have been withheld, updates have been sparse, and Lauren's case had been quietly closed over a year ago. But here's where it gets worse. Internal reports obtained by CT Insider reveal shocking failures by the Bridgeport Police Department. Detectives failed to promptly notify the families about the deaths, neglected to follow investigative protocols, and in at least one case, the lead detective failed to properly investigate entirely. Therefore, when Lauren's mother, Chantel Fields, learned from a reporter, not the police, that her daughter's case was officially closed, her grief poured out in uncontrollable tears. Her son, Lakeem Jetta, captured the family's frustration. They just kept putting on a show. It's all smoke and mirrors. But here's where the complication deepens. In December, both families filed lawsuits against the city of Bridgeport, accusing officials of conducting pseudo and sham investigations. They believe the cases were mishandled not because of oversight or incompetence, but because of systemic racial prejudice. It's like they were saying, your daughter's dead, move on. There's nothing to see here, said Chantel. The city's attorney, Taisha Toms, has so far refused to release critical records, including the 911 call placed by Lauren's date, body camera footage from responding officers, toxicology and medical examiner reports. These records could provide answers, or at least shed light on the final hours of Lauren's life. But they remain sealed, and the families remain in the dark. So here's the haunting question. Was Lauren's death just another tragic accident, one of thousands of overdoses each year? Or was there something far more sinister at play? 3 undeniable facts linger. Evidence at the scene wasn't properly collected or analyzed. Key updates and closures were hidden from the families. Critical records are still being withheld. Therefore, the family's fight isn't just about Lauren or Dorothy anymore. It's about accountability, transparency, and ensuring no other family suffers the same gut-wrenching silence. In every story like this, there's one undeniable truth. The fight doesn't end when the official case closes. Families like Lauren's have sparked movements before. They've forced change. They've made authorities listen. And this case is no different. So was this truly just a tragic accident or a failure that someone doesn't want the world to see? The answers may still be out there, hidden in records, buried in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. But one thing is clear, this story isn't over. Not until the truth comes to light.